Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. 1 week from today, the winner of the Australian Grand Prix, the opening round of the season, will have been determined. Max Verstappen may or may not have lost his streak at the head of the World Championship, which has lasted now over 1,000 days. Max firing up on all cylinders over the last couple of days, certainly after Netflix's Drive to Survive dropped a few days ago, a controversial couple of moments in that, and Max giving his take on what maybe he doesn't like about the way this series has been run. Plenty else though to get in on the day. Very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. It really does feel like the F1 season is finally here. Hamilton drops the stopwatch emoji and says the following. So of course he's ready to go at Ferrari. How good the car will be, who knows? There have been rumours that Leclerc finished the test in Bahrain less confident that he started it based on what he expected from the car. Ferrari know they've got issues they've got to solve, but if they can solve them, maybe they've got the highest potential development ceiling. Who knows? McLaren are the favourites, no doubt about that. And the drivers, they're getting out there. Here's Alex Albon today, flying out, business first, whatever, looks pretty comfortable. Out there to Australia, makes sense, get there nice and early. Of course, today's Sunday, ideally several days ahead of time. Get the jet lag out of your system so the teams and the drivers can hit the ground running. It goes, Australia, China, Japan, the first 3 rounds of the season. So early starts for us over in Europe, no doubt about that. This is a funny story as well. I don't know if Jacques Villeneuve is making his way over there, but he was at an airport in Milan and he was stuck in the toilets before then getting removed. So yeah, he got, I mean, look at this, pretty crazy stuff. They had to basically knock it off its hinges. So I'm not sure if he's on his way out there. Of course, Villeneuve was in a couple of controversial moments last season. Certainly his comment on Daniel Ricciardo at the Canadian Grand Prix caused some questions, of course, at the scene of when Ricciardo actually had an excellent weekend before he was out of the sport later on in the season. One of the big stories that I've been following the last couple of days is some of the rivalries between the fan bases are really cropping up. I think Drive to Survive has definitely enhanced this with its release a few days ago, but this whole Norris-Piastri kind of fan base rivalry, every day I see plenty of tweets of Norris fans, Piastri fans going at each other. And, well, look, this is sports. I've got no issues with it. I just think it's pretty entertaining to see where this goes, because if McLaren do have the strongest car, and I feel like McLaren fans, Norris fans, Piastri fans are thinking, this could be it, right? This could be the season. Even Piastri might not have the best qualifying pace. Norris might not have the ice, as it were, to get over the line and that winning mentality that someone like a Verstappen might do. Look, Norris believes, and he said this during the Drive to Survive episodes, that he thinks his mentality, his approach is a winning approach. We'll see. I mean, it's easy to say it. Let's see it deliver on the track. But if the car's so much better, then it's probably not going to matter as far as the competition goes. And I think that's kind of why we're starting to see some of these rivalries really pop up. I mean, there was this moment, of course, Oscar was asked, are you happy to be number 2 to Lando? What do you think he's going to say? Like, let's be real here for a second. Also, the other point is, I think, on the Oscar Piastri piece, Mark Webber is his manager. Mark Webber went through years at Red Bull playing, second fiddle, right, to Sebastian Vettel. Many of those moments are very controversial, and I'm sure that Webber doesn't want don't want to call him exactly a protege, but on some level, one of the most talented Australian drivers we have had in the sport for some time, especially now that Ricciardo's moving on. Piastri's in, and he will not want Webber, and nor will Piastri's parents and team and support staff the same thing to happen to him at McLaren as happened to Webber back in the Red Bull days. That's kind of why, if Lando is the number 1 man at McLaren, and that's how McLaren decide to support things, they were very, very hesitant to do so last season, even when it was probably a good idea for the championship. Whether or when or whether they would feel it necessary to do that again this year would be a question. But if it does become clear over the next, let's say, couple of seasons that Norris is the number 1 man, and that's probably not looking to change, I do think that Piastri would and should consider alternatives. There's been talk about Red Bull, hasn't there? That if, let's say, Red Bull lost Max, Piastri might be a man that they'd really be looking for. So, yeah, I saw some interesting tweets about this because, well, as it's described here, 4s and 81s in Lando fans and Oscar fans going at each other. And then today, McLaren released a little video with, both of these guys having a good time together around, well, Silverstone, it looks like, yeah, it says it in the caption. And there was also this pretty funny moment, I thought, as well. So, look, at the end of the day, your teammate is your first and biggest rival, frankly. That's always how it's going to be in the sport. But it's not like a good team dynamic over there can't still be retained. But if they're both in the fight for the championship, which they weren't really last year, but this year they most certainly should be, on what we understand from Bahrain, that's when things get kind of spicy. Now, speaking of Piastri to Red Bull or whatever as a potential future possibility, George Russell is making headlines for various reasons, not just his continued beef with Max Verstappen, although it may be a rather one-sided beef, some might argue. He is being linked elsewhere, right? Because we know that Max... Look, he's not going to say it, neither is Jos, neither is Toto really, but even during Drive to Survive, Toto was pretty clear about wanting to try and secure Max's services at some point or another. That is really no secret at all. Russell has no contract at the end of this upcoming season. He has no drive for 2026 as it stands. If you had to guess, will he stay at Mercedes? Probably that is more likely than not, but of course, as we've said for some time, there is no chance, as far as I'm concerned, Antonelli is going anywhere. They've put too much time and development and belief into Antonelli to let him go after a single season. Maybe he doesn't prove to be the driver that they want him to be, but it's early days. I think Antonelli was actually very impressive to me during the test in Bahrain, so we'll see. But if Max says to Toto, all right, we're going to do it, the car's going to be the stronger, what do you do? If you're Toto Wolff, Russell's got no drive for 2026. You've not re-signed the contract. Max comes knocking and says, hey, I want the drive, because you're probably going to have the best engine going forward, and you're maybe even Mercedes this year are better than Red Bull. That's not out of the realms of possibility on what we have recently seen. Is Toto going to say no after all the posturing that he's done over the last season or so? Probably not. So that's when this article came out. It was just, a theory really of a couple of pundits that maybe Cadillac could be an option. Now, I don't see this. I don't see Russell doing it, and I think he would have better opportunities. But if Cadillac came along, because we've talked about Bottas and Perez and Ricciardo and, Zhou and Tsunoda, among various other options, Palou, Colton Herta, Mick Schumacher, whatever, the list can go on and on and on. Felipe Drogovic, I'm sure some of you guys are going to say, because you always tend to, drivers that Cadillac could go for, whereas Russell surely is, he's not been on that list, has he? Let's be real. But technically he needs a drive for next year. My thought for some time was, and even Christian Horner has hinted this a couple of times, that if the situation at Red Bull transpires in a certain way, they may go for Russell, they may go for someone like Piastri. I definitely wouldn't rule out, if Max were to leave over the next couple of years, those are a couple of the names they target. Would be kind of crazy if Russell and Verstappen effectively swapped. But if you're Toto and Max comes calling and says, yeah, this Red Bull this year ain't good, you're probably going to have the best engine next year, I want to join Mercedes, then Toto will probably just send Russell the other way. I think that's maybe the most likely outcome in that scenario. But intrigued to your thoughts in the comments, but I've not really invested that much thought into that. Speaking of Red Bull, Yuki Tsunoda, thought this is interesting. I'm not sure exactly who he's pitching to anymore. Is he pitching to Horner, Marco, Red Bull Racing? Or is he pitching to another Formula 1 team? I think that is more likely at this point, because Red Bull still seemingly didn't want to promote him because of, emotional factors or his, management of certain situations. I think he was deserving of the drive. Many of you guys do as well, but Red Bull made the decision that they made. But Tsunoda says that actually he is stronger emotionally than he used to be because he's dealt with the decision well, which is an interesting take, I guess. But as he says, I think I've made some really good steps throughout the season. I definitely felt improvements and believes that his improved emotional control has helped him manage the tricky set of circumstances. Now, as I say, whatever he says, it's not going to convince Red Bull, because after what he's done over the last few seasons, if that wasn't enough, nothing frankly will be. I think he's probably talking to other teams here about their potential as well. But let's talk about Max and Lando and some of the drama that's been unfolding there. Max may or may not win this year's championship. He's, of course, on 4 in a row. Bernie Ecclestone said if he's got the car, he's going to win it again. Obviously, Jos is going to say, well, if he doesn't win it, it's not his fault, it's Red Bull's fault, which in all likelihood is going to be true if Max Verstappen doesn't win the title. And as Max said the other day, we've looked at some of these quotes over the last couple of videos, I do not think we will be in the fight to win in Melbourne. That's in 7 days' time. We will have our answer to those questions. Lando, though, it's interesting because Lando's playing down to some extent the level of McLaren's advantage. And that, I think, is honestly kind of scary, because Mercedes used to do this, right? When they would have the best car and they would say, oh, well, we're struggling with this, we're struggling with that. So this year's not going to be as good as we think it's going to be. Don't worry, guys. Like, we're not sandbagging. So, but then Lando Norris is coming out and saying that, oh yeah, we've got a real big and clear limitation here with the rear instability of the car. The car's really quite tricky. It's super unpredictable, you know? Like, we've got serious problems. Now, this is scary for the other teams on two levels. Either it's not really a big deal and McLaren are just kind of pretending that they're not as good as they actually are, or it is a problem, they can fix the problem, and therefore they become even better. The point that I will note is that this was at Bahrain, a circuit which is rear limited. Some of the traction zones put more pressure on the rear tyres than the front tyres. Most of the circuit leans that way. Certainly there are some sections which are more front limited in the middle sector, but apart from that, it's straight, it's acceleration zones, it's more rear limited. It's a track where you would expect the rear of the car to be more unstable. It was a problem for McLaren at Bahrain to some degree, but yet they were still the fastest car by a mile. Take them to a circuit such as Melbourne at Albert Park, which is very front limited, tight corners, sweeping corners, but not many massive traction zones out of slow speed corners where the rears tend to get lit up to some degree. It maybe even takes away some of that limitation, right? So looking to Albert Park, like, you got to think that McLaren are looking incredibly scary on paper. Now, one of the pieces of drama in Drive to Survive, and why Max isn't the biggest fan, to say the very least, of this type of programming, and also doing the launch event in London the other week at the F175 thing and all of that that's been happening recently. This was another such example. Now look, at the end of the day, Drive to Survive serves an excellent purpose in the sport. As a more hardcore fan, I wish that they wouldn't paint narratives that don't have some basis in reality. Like, I get what they're doing with the Russell at, of course, Spa thing when he won, but they didn't mention that he was disqualified. And I get what they're doing here as well, where they're painting this picture of, oh, Max is this, you know, big bad guy. He really hates to lose and all this. He could never be happy for anyone else winning. And I get it, right? It's easy to say, oh, here's the hero, here's the villain in the story. And Max used to kind of be perceived as the hero back in the day when Drive to Survive was all about, okay, who's going to win the Mercedes dominance? Now, of course, it's the other way around, and that's how sport works. But this was definitely noted. This is Miami when Lando wins. What a race it was in the end. Lando was so happy with the victory. Max was really happy for him, or was he? Because here's Max absolutely steaming, as you guys can tell. But of course, you'll also tell that this cap is the Zaandvort Max Verstappen cap. And we see another example here. Here he is. Now, of course, Zaandvort, Max was not a particularly happy bunny. Lando had just trounced him on his back turf and said simply lovely on the radio after it. That was his home race, and one of the final ones that they're potentially ever going to have in the Netherlands after it's off the calendar for next year. This is Miami, this is Zaandvort, this is Zaandvort, this is, still Zaandvort. You can actually see, I think it's in this shot, you can see the Netherlands flag. You guys can just about make it out anyway. The Netherlands flag on this hat in the background, you guys can just about see it there. There you go. So, it was obviously not at the same time. And yeah, we can actually see it. Here it is. That is the Zaandvort cap that Max had on. So people notice this. And of course, like, Netflix aren't surprised that people notice this. It causes discussion around the series. And that's probably fine. But Formula One fans who watched the season know that Max was actually really happy for Lando having won this race. This was Max and Lando that evening having an absolutely sensational time. And that's what Max said on his stream just yesterday. So Max was mentioning a few things, and there's about 20 pixels on your screen here, but I will play it anyway. Max basically taking the mick out of the Drive to Survive editing by saying, apparently I was really upset. I don't know what you're talking about there, Netflix.
Apparently I was very upset after Miami.
Yeah, wearing the Zaandvort hat.
Yeah, I literally had the best time ever Sunday night. So I don't know what I was upset.
No.
So entertaining as always here for Max Verstappen. We'll see, I guess, what the viewing figures look like for this year's run of Drive to Survive. But I feel like it's causing more controversy and drama and stirring attention than it even did last year and for like the last couple of years. So, for the sport, it's probably a good thing. And there's a lot of excitement, of course, going into the new year. And also the way that Netflix will try and play it is that, okay, well, Max did eventually win the title. Lando is likely to be the kind of plucky underdog again this season on some level, so why not keep that storyline going? But the reality was that Max, having lost the race to Lando for Lando's first ever win, kind of played down to some extent the luck factor involved, and he also said, I'm very happy for Lando. It's been a long time coming, and it's not going to be his last one. He definitely deserves it today. So, nice words between friends. Of course, that is not what we actually saw in reality. So I understand why they paint the storylines, but, you will have your own perspective on it, I'm sure, in the comments section below. Just one final thing to close out with, really, because, this has been a bit of a concern of mine, and I'm sure that it has been for you guys as well, just because we've been hyping up 2025 as such a mega championship on paper. I do remember at the start of last season, after Red Bull dominated the early rounds, it was like, I was convinced, everyone seemed convinced that not only was 2024 going to be a horrific season with another Easy Max win, but it was going to be the same story in 2025, and nobody was going to be able to get close to the Red Bull during this cycle of regulations apart from the Ferrari in the first year. That story, a couple of months later, quickly turned on its head. So I think the bottom line is, however this season begins, with the McLaren the dominant force, whatever happens, it's not going to be over just yet. I know there's a bit of a fear, maybe even among some of the other teams, and certainly among some of the other fan bases, that this could be a clean one for McLaren. But look, all we're basing that on is testing. The other teams will have higher ceilings than they have shown so far. Whether they can get there is a question mark. How this, Lando Oscar rivalry plays out on track is another question mark. What if we got a Spain 2016 all over again? I mean, with 24 rounds in a season, there's going to be some drama that is inherent in Formula 1. But yeah, 7 days to go. It's tomorrow. It's race week again. Officially, it's been a long time coming on Friday. I mean, really, it's going to be... I'm going to be in Dallas, actually, on the Friday, Saturday. So it's actually going to be Saturday night for me. The race is going to be, technically. Although it's 4 a.m., I think, the race on UK time on Sunday morning. It'll be 10 p.m. for me in Dallas. And then it goes far later than that on the Sunday over there in Australia, where the sun is typically setting in Melbourne. So mega weekend to come. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.